Well, hi all. Thanks for coming tonight. Some awesome presentations so far. I'm Alex Krass. I'm a senior here at Richmond. I study environmental studies and business, so bringing a little business on this one to change it up a little from the other presentations. So to start off, I'll give a little background, I guess, on how my fellowship started. So I actually took a class with a teacher here and did a project on divestment. And divestment is essentially, to put it simply, taking your investments out of a company. And I focused, and my mentor, Mary Finley Brooke, wanted to focus on fossil fuels specifically. And this has been a pretty big movement in the past few years. If you look across the nation, a lot of schools have been divesting, whether it's from coal specifically or more broader fossil fuels. But a lot of student groups, especially in Virginia, have been doing a lot of fossil fuel divestment work. So this was something that we were both really interested in, and we were lucky to meet Drew Gallagher, who ended up being my site supervisor at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who has done some awesome work with divestment across the state of Virginia. So that's kind of the reason behind the work that we did and why we got involved with Drew. And to tell you a little about CCAN, so CCAN, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, is essentially a grassroots environmental organization here in Virginia and Maryland, and like was just mentioned, they build coalitions specifically around the environment, looking to build community support against certain environmental issues. Some of the work that they do involves the oil pipelines that are proposed right now in Virginia. This can be an interesting topic, but a lot of work they do is kind of fighting against those pipelines in communities who are going to be negatively impacted by them. Other things that they do is helping to pass a regional climate plan in the state of Virginia with Obama's new climate protection plan. That's a pretty important thing. So they're looking at to get more renewables within the climate package that Virginia has, specifically wind energy, and they look to protect the coast of Virginia from rising sea levels, which will potentially be an issue moving forward. So that's a little bit about CCAN. I had an interesting experience there because a lot of the work that I did wasn't actually focused on divestment. I was kind of thrown into this oil train campaign that they hadn't actually done any work on here at Richmond. So these are some photos. I know they're kind of intense, but there's some photos from exploding oil trains that have happened in the past few years, and that's what sparked this issue. It started about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, where there was a large oil train explosion. You can see it at the top right screen there, and it pretty much flattened almost this entire town. And from that point on, a lot of campaigns started to try and get more information specifically from oil trains. I think at a lot of cities, the amount of information that community members know and the leaders who would take on something like this, like the fire departments, is very minimal. And that's a serious issue, especially in a city like Richmond. So why I was leading this campaign and why it was so important for Richmond was these oil trains go directly through the city of Richmond right along the James River. And although these crazy accidents don't happen often, if they did, especially in a city like Richmond, they would cause some pretty massive damage. And we felt that the city of Richmond and the community were not very well educated about this issue and weren't aware that this was even an issue that existed. I'm sure most of you aren't. So we kind of led this awareness and education campaign, talking to the community members, talking to the chief fire department, working with the James River Association as well, to try and spread awareness of how important this issue is. And we ended up with a really awesome educational event. At the end, there was a national week-long oil train week of action springing from the 2-year anniversary of the Lac-Mégantic disaster. So that was an awesome event we held. We had the chief fire department there giving some education to the community, along with the James River Association. We ended up holding a vigil down right on Chaco Slip to remember those who lost their lives in the Lac-Mégantic disaster a couple years ago. So that was a really cool experience, although it didn't relate directly to my academic search. It was kind of fun to be thrown into something that I wasn't expecting. And it was an awesome experience to lead that. And knowing that it's an important issue, I say go look at it. It's actually fairly terrifying at times. Hopefully nothing happens here, and hopefully the information we get becomes better, especially here in the city of Richmond. But moving beyond that, so I was very lucky to have 4 other interns with me at the Richmond office here in CCAN, and they were 4 lovely ladies from across the state of Virginia. 2 go to UVA, 1 goes to Mary Washington, and 1 Virginia Tech. And how my research and academic work kind of fused with my experience at CCAN was actually through those interns, which was really cool. So all 4 of them were involved with divestment campaigns and are currently involved in divestment campaigns at their respective schools. So I come into work after the two girls who go to UVA having a meeting with the Board of Trustees about divesting. One girl just came out of the semester at Mary Washington where students actually got arrested at a stand-in at the school, so it was a very hot topic for them. And that kind of helped me, understand better the campaigns that were working and the information that, might be helpful for them. Because divestment is a very broad topic, as we found out, and there's a lot of information that you can look at. So it was awesome to be able to talk to them and know, what are the important things that we can do to help the campaign. And that's kind of where the research came in and connected. So those are a few bullet points from one of the papers that Mary Finley-Brooke and I co-authored. It's still in process, and we're just as close as possible to it being done. And it's been an awesome experience. So what we looked at and what we kind of figured out from these girls was, a lot of what they're missing is the classic finance and economic background to divestment. And I won't dive into the jargon. I know that seems a little complicated on the screen there. But what we wanted to do was kind of better define that and look at the strategies that are existing today in divestment across school endowments, pension funds, other nonprofit organizations, and better understand what they've done, what's been successful, how it's helped them lower their carbon exposure. And when I say lower carbon exposure, that basically means, having less money in carbon reserves in the ground or less money in current greenhouse gas emissions, things that would impact the changing climate. So we tried to better define what fossil fuels is. I think we found that a lot of schools are like, let's fully divest from fossil fuels, when in reality that's not necessarily possible. And what exactly do you mean by fossil fuels? There can be so many definitions, so we kind of wanted to whittle that down so people could better understand it and kind of attach that to their specific investment strategies. Beyond that, we did cover a lot of different strategies. There was a solid amount to go through, and some range from divesting from the worst 5 coal companies, some range from taking the whole energy industry and divesting from that. So there was a lot of different things that people did, and we wanted to understand better how they compared and contrasted and how they could be used in an endowment situation. And then moving on from there, we looked at the low carbon indexes, which was really cool because that had some performance indicators on carbon emissions. So it saw, if a low carbon index took out these number of companies, how did that actually impact their carbon exposure? How much less were they invested in greenhouse gas emissions and carbon reserves, which was very important. And I think that was something that was really interesting to see. Then moving on from there, what sparked this was, could we divest at Richmond also? We had some conversations, especially throughout the semester leading up to the summer. Would it be possible to divest at Richmond? How would we go about divesting at Richmond if it was possible? And I was lucky enough with a couple other students who are here today to talk with the Vice President Hale and the COO of Spider Management about that opportunity. And Richmond's endowment is one of the more complicated things that I've ever come across. We don't have anything directly invested, if that makes any sense. So everything's through a third-party manager. So if we wanted to divest, it would take a lot of policy recommendations to these managers and have them do what they're doing with our money. So it was very complicated, and I think some of the conclusions we came to was, although they may not be directly invested in anything, you still can have policies within the spider management and within things like that, so that you do lower your carbon exposure. Although it may not be as direct as like a personal portfolio where I decide to take my money out of fossil fuels to one extent or another, it definitely is still something that's possible. And I think that was, really helpful to understand and see, especially moving forward with the conversation of divestment here at Richmond. So that's kind of the rundown of the research I did, how it connected. It was an awesome experience. It was very eclectic. I learned an incredible amount. You see there, we looked at some of the Bloomberg carbon risk evaluation tool. I never used Bloomberg terminals before, and they're scary. Those people who sit in the finance lab, they're cranking away all day, they're quite impressive because there's so much to learn there. But it was awesome to be able to have that experience, have experience in the investing world, have experience in the student movement world, and have experience leading a campaign. So it was an excellent summer. I love being here in Richmond. I want to thank Drew Gallagher, who was unfortunately not able to be here, Mary Finley-Brooke, of course, Cassie, thank you very much for coming and visiting. That was awesome. And last but not least, the Burns family for supporting this awesome fellowship. So if you have any questions about CCAN, divestment, anything like that afterwards, feel free to ask. Thank you.